There are 1 billion people without access to clean drinking water today, many of whom live in the peri-urban areas, the areas around many of these very large cities. And expanding service to those cities is very expensive. Cities aren't very good at it.
No one can give even a good estimate of how many people live in Nigeria's economic center, Lagos. It could be 7 million, it could be 20 million. Every month, the city grows by several thousand more. The burden on its resources grows proportionately. Even now, most of its residents often have no dependable power supply, no regular rubbish collection, no jobs, and no clean drinking water. Many residents get their water supply from public taps in their districts, but there are times when the taps run dry for days or even weeks. Then people are forced to fetch their water from neighbouring districts, a practice known locally as water tourism. The water sold on the streets is expensive, but hardly clean.
The tap water we buy, that's tap water. But you can see the color of the water, man, the water is not even green. The water is a little bit of color. And by the time most of us don't drink it, we still boil it again and drink it. Manage to drink it, but it's not so pure.
Only about a quarter of the city is connected to the water mains. If people are late paying their bill, their water is simply shut off. But those who do pay often fare no better. The system is riddled with leaks. The pipes are frequently damaged by people tapping into them illegally. Secured access to a well is enough to ensure middle-class status, even though one well is generally shared by many families.
As for the poor, they often have no other choice but to buy drinking water in bags on the street. The bags are expensive, but there's no guarantee the water is safe to drink. It may be contaminated. Where a water system fails to meet a city's needs, black markets thrive.
The situation is that you find that majority of producers of this packaged water, they're not licensed. They're not licensed, so and it becomes difficult to trace them. There's so many of them, there are thousands of them. Some even do their own in their backyard, in their kitchen, in the markets.
A broken water line can wreak havoc in Lagos's urban jungle. Scenes like this may one day be commonplace in the developing world's megacities of the future.
The Indonesian capital, Jakarta, has a population of 13 to 14 million by day and 10 million by night. Like many cities in this part of the globe, it's nearly doubled in size over the past 30 years, drawing in people from all over this Southeast Asian giant.
The Mandarin Oriental Hotel has in its garden a vital necessity for a reliable water supply, a well of its own. It's used to top up the supply from the municipal system.
In the hotel's own well, we can store up to 200 cubic meters of water. We're allowed 10 cubic meters a day for our own use. We get the rest from the city. But if the city is unable to supply the water, we're allowed to take care of all our needs from our own well.
The megacity is an organism that needs water to live. And as is also the case in many other urban giants, Jakarta's pipeline system fails to supply even a third of the city's total need. Not just hotels, but even private homes and factories rely on wells of their own. The Mandarin Oriental consumes about 400 cubic meters a day. The water from both the well and the tap is filtered again in the hotel's own system, but the quality is still not good. Nowhere in Jakarta is the tap water actually fit to drink, not even in a 5-star hotel.
Jakarta is the urban hub of this island nation. It produces over 2/3 of Indonesia's gross domestic product. If the city's water crisis reaches critical mass, it will send shockwaves far beyond the shores of Java. For centuries, the city has had water in abundance from local sources. It's the population explosion of the past decades that's pushed it to the brink of disaster.
The main sources for Jakarta has been used. So in quantity, I think we will have difficulty. Second, also in quality. You know that up to this moment, our government cannot not be able yet to prevent water pollution.
The rivers have been turned into dumping grounds for industrial and household effluent. Several tons of offal are flushed into Jakarta's main river, Ciliwung. Its waters have many colours: yellow, green, black, almost anything but clear. It's an ideal breeding ground for E. coli bacteria, a primary cause of diarrhea in humans. It's clear that not only do the cities consume vast quantities of potable water, they produce vast quantities of wastewater, another problem of unimaginable scale. The rivers carry the raw sewage into Jakarta Bay. By then it's a vile mixture of heavy metals, toxic industrial effluents, and household waste.
Slowly but surely, the wounded sea is returning to haunt the city. Salt water is infiltrating the groundwater as it's drawn from the wells, with increasing intensity. One district after another is finding its water supply contaminated by the brine, which has already penetrated several kilometers beneath the city, a problem shared by many coastal cities.
Here in the Canary area, the water in the wells is still good. But in other parts of the city, like Cempaka Putih, Sunt, and Tanjung Priok, brine has already seeped into the groundwater.
With a population of some 20 million, Mexico City is one of the biggest cities in the world. And the problems it's facing with its water supply are both typical for megacities and unique. The city water department's emergency service receives an average of nearly 600 calls a day, most of them complaining of dry taps, broken water pipes, or potholes appearing in the streets. For years, the water system of this megalopolis has been on the brink of collapse. One crisis follows another. It's a perpetual state of emergency.
The water department has squads of maintenance workers constantly on call throughout the city. The situations they face on a daily basis have become routine. There are always burst water mains that need fixing. Mexico City's taps are fed by more than 12,000 kilometers of water lines. Just monitoring and maintaining them poses an enormous and increasingly urgent problem. Fully 1/3 of the water pumped into the crumbling network is lost. At a rate of 6 million cubic meters consumed by the city every day, it amounts to a small river that steadily flows into oblivion.
They break mostly because of the water pressure. The system only works when there's enough pressure, but that's exactly what makes the pipes burst. They're old and should be replaced.
Water lines break in Mexico City around 200 times a day. The precious drops just seep into the ground unused. The system has been unable to keep pace with a population that's grown by leaps and bounds, especially during the 1970s. Now there are simply too many people and too little water.
They're a city where they're at the limits of their water supply. It's very, very expensive to find any sources of new supply. And it's also a city where they're beginning to do some innovative things in the water efficiency side. They're beginning to look at the wasteful uses of water and the loss of water in the existing infrastructure that they have.
Mexico City has literally sucked the ground dry beneath its feet. Sinkholes are appearing and buildings are sinking at the rate of 10 centimeters a year as the water table recedes further and further. In Mexico, water has become a matter of top priority, affecting the country far beyond the capital city.
In a valley 150 kilometers away and 1,100 meters lower, boats sail across a reservoir of drinking water destined for Mexico City. The megalopolis tapped all its own water sources long ago. Now, it relies on the reserves of surrounding regions to supply the rest. This treatment plant is one component of a vast regional supply complex. The clean water produced here goes to a battery of stations which pump it uphill to Mexico City's elevation of 2,300 meters at 19,000 liters a second. City officials had plans to draw even more water from the surrounding countryside, but they were foiled by the fierce resistance of the local people, who needed the water for their own use. Bringing water in from long distances is an energy-intensive operation. It costs about €1 to produce 1 cubic meter, but the consumer is charged only a quarter of that. Mexico City's millions depend on this loss-making business for their survival.
Cities have always been built along rivers and lakes and seas, wherever there was a ready supply of water. But Las Vegas was plunked down in the desert of southern Nevada. It appears like a mirage, luring travelers with its artificial fountains and enticing cascades of water. Grand hotels spoil their guests with pools, water fun parks, and fountains. Las Vegas lives from the millions of tourists who come here every year. But water does not spring eternal, not even for this would-be Shangri-La. It's the suburbs that consume the lion's share, and Las Vegas is taking action.
The water department patrols the suburban streets, keeping a sharp eye out for anyone wasting water.
The most common type of water wastage issues we find are over-irrigation, and right now, because it's summertime, we find a lot of time of day violations, which means they can't water between the hours of noon, 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. Plus, you get a lot of people here that are from other states, other cities that have different water demands and water restrictions, so they don't know what Nevada is all about as far as water uses go.
The suburbanites are the most lavish wasters of their city's liquid assets, consuming over 70% of the available supply. With an average 6,000 new residents a month, Las Vegas is now the fastest growing metropolitan area in the United States.
28 Castle Bay, observing a time of day violation. Weather conditions are a little bit breezy. You can't really determine whether or not.
The purpose of the water patrols is to cut back on consumption while increasing ecological awareness. Those who overwater their lawns can be fined. Las Vegas is cracking down to keep from drying up.
An hour's drive from Las Vegas is Lake Mead, created when the Hoover Dam was built across the Colorado River. But this water has to be shared with other states, As Las Vegas' population increases, the amount available to each individual dwindles proportionately. A drought has hung on for 4 years now. The lake is dropping steadily. The situation is getting serious.
When we go through this drought experience here in southern Nevada, we're already learning what a cultural shock it is. Because this community has lived in a state of virtual reality. There's no connection between its water supply and the weather every year. We just look out on Lake Mead and we see this huge lake and we think, the people here think, well, that's our water supply and it's very big and it's very full and it's all ours. All that's very wrong. Changing that is very painful.
As the world's population expands and more people flee the countryside, more cities will grow into megalopolises, most of them in the developing world. In this regard, Lagos is a vision of things to come. The city has no hope of keeping pace with its own growth. Healthcare facilities are overwhelmed. The deadliest diseases can be traced back to contaminated water. On average, 6,000 people die of these diseases every day around the world. The poor are forced to spend what little money they have on bottled water, and they often pay even more dearly with their health, since, bottled or not, the water is barely fit to drink.
Anytime there's rainfall, there's always going to be a surge in cholera. It's just a pattern, and it has been year in, year out. So we, the doctors, are feeling concerned about it.
The cause is the contamination of the water supply with raw sewage. Rain washes dirty water into the pipelines for clean water. The puddles on the street are breeding grounds for malaria, cholera, and other diseases.
If we don't meet those needs, we're going to continue to have hundreds of millions of cases a year of water-related diseases. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid, schistosomiasis, guinea worm. There are a whole series of diseases associated with our failure to meet basic human needs for water.
Lagos doesn't have a single working water treatment plant. This one was built with development aid money in the 1980s, but never actually put into operation. It's just one example among many. This tank was set up by a politician campaigning for public office. It dispenses water free of charge, but only a very few people benefit from it. Years ago, in the same district, a waterworks complete with mains network was finished. What's still missing are the connections to the household taps. All the 500,000 people here want is running water, but all they get is a torrent of mismanagement.
We are not happy at all about it. You know, these are what government should do for us. We don't need to be asking for it. It's our fundamental right.
Like so many major cities around the globe, Jakarta regards privatization as the panacea for its water ills. A few years ago, the federal government opened Indonesia's doors to the multinationals Lyonnaise des Eaux and Thames Water. It was hoped they would relieve Jakarta's water crisis with their combination of initiative, experience, and cash. The water purveyor's aims are ambitious.
Jakarta, as a metropolitan and also as a capital of the country, it is not, Jakarta should be the barometer for Indonesia and also as a gate for Indonesia. So that's why we have to have access at least within 10 years, 75% coverage.
For now, that's a vision for a still distant future. Asia's ongoing economic slump And the collapse of the Indonesian rupiah in the 1990s made the city and the corporations partners in financial misery. The expansion of the pipeline network is on hold, water bills are rising, the private suppliers are struggling, and the people of Jakarta still depend on well water.
It's only a matter of time before water replaces oil as the life's blood of civilization. A shift that's symbolized by Jakarta's gallon refill stations for drinking water. Each one is a mini treatment plant. The prices are a great deal cheaper than for bottled water. This station is licensed and inspected. It's one more last-minute reprieve for a city desperately trying to stave off catastrophe.
Mexico City is also taking emergency action. Tank trucks carry water to areas with no pipelines, to the city's outskirts, where the poorest of the poor live. The residents queue up for their water rations. They depend on regular deliveries for one of life's most basic necessities.
We send 40 to 50 tank trucks a day to these people, day for day, all week long, even on Sundays. We also send them to blocks of flats and schools and hospitals, day in, day out.
It's only a makeshift solution, but it's vital to the survival of the city's poor. Mexico City's well-to-do follow the water supply, flocking to the west, where the water pressure is the highest, or to the south, where the most wells are.
There's no single solution to Mexico City's water problem. There can only be measures to help relieve a nearly hopeless situation. The entire pipeline network is to be replaced in an effort to stop water loss. That would be cheaper and more efficient than continually developing new sources. But it'll take 15 years to rebuild the city's water system completely.
In addition, Mexico City has declared a moratorium on new housing around its edges. The very last thing this megalopolis needs is even more people and an even greater strain on its resources. To further discourage growth, no expansion of the existing water network is permitted.